George Mason University is actually bringing Control Warrior. And I was just about to talk about this because I remember Wava playing a lot of Control Warrior at times. I don't actually know what his stance on Grim Patron is. That's another thing that influences it at times too, is that sometimes people are in camps where they just don't want to play Grim Patron Warrior.
Yeah.
They think that it is overhyped. They don't think it's as good as everyone says it is. And once again, the dynamic you mentioned, when you have 3 guys working together, you don't have time for all 3 of you to talk through Grim Patron. It makes a lot of sense to bring Control Warrior.
It does. And Patron Warrior, you have to have a lot of practice on that deck to play it at the highest level. Wow. You have to sort of develop muscle memory as well. And if none of your players have that, then it's better to bring Control Warrior.
Look at that opening hand from Connecticut.
But George Mason has the card that can completely stop a Mech Mage in its tracks, and that card is Brawl. We talked about it earlier. Mech Mage does not have a lot of longevity. They run out of steam very quickly because they're emptying their hand. And unlike other aggressive decks, they don't have something like a clock that Hunter has with their hero power, or something like Divine Favor to refill their hand like aggro or aggressive Secret Paladin has. So
here's the thing. With a hand like this, running out of gas may not be a concern. It's just a matter of, does my opponent have the answers to all of this stuff?
Yeah. You don't run out of gas if you only have to drive 2 miles at 250 miles per hour.
5 power on turn 1 is their play. It is going to face down an Armor Smith, but again, this Armor Smith, this thing's going to have to work overtime because they have more coming behind this. They have Mad Scientist, they got Tinkertown Technician, they got Piloted Shredder. The Clockwork Gnome's really the only card stranded in their hand at the moment. But even then, it could just fill out their curve like a Mech Warper gets drawn. So many things are working right for Connecticut in this game. Wow, it looks like they're actually going to take out this Armor Smith right away. They don't want this to be a problem. And that's very interesting to me. I mean, this is definitely a threatening minion. You do protect your Clockwork Gnome this way. But I thought they were just going to be much more aggressive than that and just outright push. I mean, look at their hand.
Yeah, that's... They're playing very safe. And when you're playing Mech Mage, I don't know if you have the room to play safe.
You do at times.
You don't have the authority.
But here's the thing. I think the bigger reason why they might be playing a little bit more safe is that when players get their backs against the wall, they'll tend to make plays where they feel like they're hedging their bets against stuff.
Yeah.
And that Armor Smith, once again, it can be super dangerous. And they still don't know if George Mason University is playing Grim Patron or not. So Saint Unstable Ghoul hits the board after that. Now they're looking at a spot where their hand doesn't feel so good. So kind of hedging your bets against it, it makes sense in some scenarios. But again, with this hand of this strength, I think I would have liked to see them just kind of be a little bit more reckless and start putting the heat on them.
Yeah. Start forcing the Control Warrior to play defensively. I mean, that's sort of what the deck does regardless. But your win condition is not to sort of grind them out. You're never going to win that grindy out battle if you're a Mech Mage. And, I mean, going into the following turns, George Mason just has such fantastic tools. I mean, they're going to Deathbite next turn, and then they can pretty much just pocket the Brawl and just save it once UConn inevitably just empties their hand.
Yeah, I do like that they have split up their threats here. This will help them a lot versus Deathbite. Deathbite doesn't have a lot of great attacks in this spot. It will threaten the 2 Clockwork Gnomes afterwards. But that means you're getting the damage from them. You're going to see your spare parts. And then Piloted Shredder is going to drop the body after that Deathbite activation too. And you're not losing your Tinkertown Technician right away. So a lot of benefits to actually playing it this way now that they have played defensively.
Maybe
instead of kind of putting all their eggs in one basket with that Tinkertown Technician.
Yeah. So George Mason's got to think through this turn. They equip the Deathbite. They could attack into like the Mad Scientist, then play Sludge Belcher next turn, throw into the Mirror Endy, kill it off, killing the Clockwork Gnomes as well.
Maybe
I think the big debate here is the merits of using the Fiery War Axe instead
and armoring up
of the Deathbite. But I think with 2 1-health minions sitting on the board, setting up that 1 damage effect from Deathbite, probably just a little bit better. And I can tell you with Connecticut's hand that Deathbite, one of the last things they wanted to see.
Yeah. And sometimes against more aggressive decks, there is merit in spacing out hero powers and being efficient with hero power usage as a Control Warrior player. And so Fire War Axe can sometimes be a good choice in that scenario, but definitely hitting the nail on the head with the 2 1-health creatures. It's just such a juicy board for...
Yeah, so now having protected that Clockwork Gnome, it actually has gotten some pretty sizable amounts of damage in. So even despite the fact that they played more defensively early on, they were rewarded because that Clockwork Gnome survived for so long. And now they get even more rewarded. George Mason University has to play this Sludge Belcher to trigger that mirror entity, they don't want it to be a big factor. So that means the Pilot Destroyer sticking around. This is, I mean, this could be absolute disaster for George Mason University if UConn can get control of this board and really start to run away with things.
Yeah. I think the Sludge Belcher getting propped by the mirror entity is probably the best case scenario, though, because you look at their hand, they just don't have anything. It's a Sludge Belcher or, oh, look at that, a Sludge Belcher.
What to do?
What if you draw into like an Alex Straza or one of your big threats next turn? You can't afford to sit on that mirror entity because you have to, at some point, fight back on the board. So they did have a good way to deal with it by, you know, playing it first, and you are taking 1 damage on your own Sludge Belcher, but you're killing the first iteration of that Belcher on the other side. So
What to do?
it's not the worst scenario.
They're going to choose to go with Goblin Blast Mage here first. Looks like they're debating over it, though. Their instinct is to go with the Goblin Blast Mage, which it is the biggest minion they can play this turn, but I think I favor this Tinkertown Technician because there are spare parts that can just be such a major benefit to what direction you want to take. The second reversing switch is not going to be it, but they still get a 4-4 and they get a 2-3 out of this, and they have the 1-1 minion protecting both of those. So second Death Spite, even a Fiery War Axe, none of those are going to work on this turn. And this is really where George Mason University, they have two distinct game plans here. Number one is to brawl right now and get what value they can. Number two is to play this Sludge Belcher and hope that Connecticut overcommits to the board at this point.
Yeah, and with Mech Mage, you don't really have a lot of options to play around the brawl because you sort of have to go full speed ahead because you don't climb back on the board as well as we talked about earlier. But we'll have to see if they can recognize whether or not this is a situation where they should be playing around a card like Brawl.
Yeah, I think I like the reversing switch here into the Goblin Blast Mage. Hope that you get the right rolls, and then you can move forward from there. But I don't mind using the mana super efficiently either and just going with the second mirror entity. George Mason University has shown you with that first Sludge Belcher, they really don't have ways to play around mirror entity in this spot. And so more minions could present a big threat, but, you know, always at that same time, you got to worry about Brawl when you know they're playing Control Warrior. You have to not overcommit to the scenario. So lots of things to consider for them.
Yeah. It's actually a really tough turn. You thought they were looking at the reversing switch early on to be able to trade into that Sludge Belcher a little better if they had played it in combination with Goblin Blast Mage, but now they're looking at, you know, just trading into it naturally and maybe just like starting over fresh with that board.
Yeah, they're going with the mana efficient plays here. They actually want to get the Snow Trigger down too to try to shut off weapons potentially in the future.
One of the best cards against Warriors in general is Snow Charter. In combination with Water Elemental, freeze effects can completely stop Warriors in their tracks.
George Mason, once again, doesn't really have a prime Brawl opportunity. You know, I would say this is about as good a turn as any. But now you're rolling into those 7 mana turns where Dr. Boom, Archmage Antonidas, all those cards start to become threats from the Mech Mage.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, they're hovering over it.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to get a better one is really what it boils down to. So, you know, they don't want that Snow Chugger sticking around, but they also don't want that extra 2 damage to be put onto their face. They fall to 15.
Not the worst outcome.
And here's the thing. They do know that 3 of the cards in UConn's hand are spare parts.
If they've been keeping track.
Yeah, so those aren't like the biggest threats in the world. So now if you're UConn, do you want to use the Annoyatron to block some of these weapon hits? Or do you just want to get the extra power on board from the Spider Tank?
Yeah. Fire War Axe that's equipped right now from George Mason doesn't trade with the Spider Tank by itself. So I think just being mana efficient and pushing the damage this turn ends up being the better play. And that's not a great draw. That is not the hand that you want if you're in this position at 11 health.
Yeah, Harrison Jones fights weapons really well. Does not fight 3-4s and 5-4s very well.
Yeah, well, Goblin Blast Mage is a different kind of weapon.
Yeah. It's a sharpshooter, man. Just 4 straight to the face.
Sharpshooter, sure. Looks like he just throws fire out of his mouth.
I hope Goblin Blast Mage is a character in Overwatch.
Just he has just one ability, blast.
And if you have like one of the mechanical units on your team, like that's where his ultimate happens.
He can, but it's only activated.
Really quick. Yeah, it's only activated if you have a mechanical unit.
Admiral, I think you should stick to Hearthstone casting.
Shield Slam, Execute, 2 prime removal spells on a card that's already dealt you 4 damage.
Well, they're keeping track. They know that 3 of those cards are spare parts. So they can say, well, that's everything. That's all the threats.
Well,
Their hands could virtually be empty.
the problem is they don't have any way to take care of any of these threats. And this is exactly what we were talking about earlier with the brute force from George Mason University, is that there really are no wrong questions in terms of the threat counts. If you have minions on board that are attacking, that can get the game over with. George Mason University has no way to answer these minions, and the Shield Maiden, they just drew it, and that's it. They don't even want to reveal any more of their cards. They know there's not any way they're going to effectively fight this board position.